Right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this new webinar in our brand recovery series. Today, we're gonna do a deep dive. To frame what we are doing with the deep dives and the frameworks that we're showing, so you have the general framework in which we analyze different phases on a strategic level and see what brands can do with their advertising and their media in each different phase. Last week, we introduced the third phase, which is the back to normal phase, a phase in which consumers are trying to pick up the pace again, that businesses are thinking about how they can build sustainable growth again. Um, and within this framework, we do sometimes a few deep dives on specific expertises. And today we're going to do a deep dive on influencer marketing, because we've seen that influencer marketing has been impacted over the past few months, obviously because of a lot of measures that were taken, full lockdown, not being able to go to events and such. So today we're going to look at how influencers have work their way around COVID and how they're coming out of it. Um, just before we start, just a few rules of the game, let's say. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom tool. If you so not in the chat, but in the Q&A one, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And should you want more information on the initiative of the Brand Recovery Series, please feel free to go to brandrecoveryseries.com, which is our blog, or send us an email at brandrecoveryseries@densweeges.com if you have very specific questions, and we will help you further. So for today, we have a guest speaker, which is Marjolein Laekeman, our head of the the StoryLab, who will now take the floor on influencers. Marjolein, here you go.
Thank you. Well, let's see whether this works. Yes. Welcome everybody. So I am Marjolein, like Thibaut said. It's my first webinar, so it's a bit strange to not see you, but that's the same for everybody in these COVID times. Like Thibaut said, so we're going to talk about influencer marketing today, and the aim is, in fact, to take you through some observations on influencer marketing from the last months, but also to give you some advice on how to work with this touch point in the coming period. I also added some cases to illustrate these insights, and let's go ahead and take a look on some facts and figures in social media. First of all, we see that, of course, the consumption of social media is higher. That will not be a surprise. So we're at nearly 2 hours of consumption in social media in Belgium versus, of course, less time before COVID. We also see that Instagram TV is consumed much more. It's really a format that's knew a lot of success in these COVID times. In general, video is a format that is really very successful that we saw in the last weeks. We also see a big increase in engagement of social media, which is, of course, a very important KPI on social media. And also globally, social media consumption was up to 44% globally. Facebook, which is maybe social media that suffered a bit versus TikTok and Instagram, saw also an increase which was mainly linked to the Facebook Messenger. I think you all know that in the last months we used a lot of chats apps, and Facebook Messenger was one of them. Also on YouTube, there was a really we saw a lot of increase in views, which also caused a good engagement on this social media. And what we also saw was that with cancellation of live sporting events, this led to an increased demand for sports-related content. And this we saw also a lot on YouTube. In general, there was also a lot more content created by influencers because, of course, they also had more time. And the last insight we saw was that also Twitch was really very popular because the gaming sector also knew an increase during COVID. It's one of the sectors that really was very successful during these times. These were some general insights on social media, and now I'm going to dive into two touch points that are very important for influencer marketing. And first of all, we're going to take a look on Instagram. In fact, in May, we saw that Instagram was already at 1.8 billion times download, and we see a big increase on everything that is video formats. And yeah, of course, like I said, there was an increase in engagement, but we saw an uptick of 76% more likes during these times. So this shows that, sorry for these hiccups. You get some live information from a newsblad, but I don't know how I can, well, not so important. So they are very receptive and responsive to influencer advertising during these times. Now, Instagram is very important, but I think you all know that there was another touch point that was very successful during COVID times. And this is, of course, TikTok. If we see that Instagram was already successful, TikTok is a really successful story. So in Q1 2020, we saw 315 million downloads. And with 2 billion downloads, we see that TikTok is in fact the most successful app ever. Now we must say that India is the country that contributed a lot to the success of TikTok, because there the increase was even higher, and so this contributed to the big success of TikTok. In time spent, we see that people spend on average 45 minutes on the app, and that they open it 8 times every day. Also, the engagement rate, which is higher on all social media during these times, because people have more time and are more receptive. But on TikTok, it's over 70%. Concerning the profile, of course, we know that TikTok is rather young, but an important thing that we saw during Corona was that the profile of TikTok became broader. So also older people downloaded the app, and so we saw that the profile was a bit less young than the period before, but still, of course, 63% of the profile is between 10 and 29. And it's a rather female social media, TikTok. We see that the ratio is 2:1, so nearly 2 times more female followers on TikTok. These were some general insights on social media, Instagram and TikTok. But now, of course, the aim is to see what the impact of COVID was on influencer marketing. So although we saw that the social media was really in a very good shape these last months, like a lot of other touch points and like a lot of other media, influencer marketing, of course, also suffered from the Corona crisis because of the business that was really in decline, because of budgets that were under pressure. But of course, specifically for influencer marketing, there was also no possibility to organize influencer events, which of course gives a lot of possibility to create content. There were also a lot of COVID restrictions, of course, also linked to these, the fact that they couldn't organize events like advertisers, they could not organize anything. And of course, the fact that some of these subjects that influencers normally talk about were rather sensitive. And this caused, of course, some problems also in influencer marketing. If we're going to have a look to the sectors that are active on influencer marketing, we saw sectors that were really in difficulty, like travel, fashion, entertainment, for example, movie releases that were not possible, cinemas are closed, theme parks that were closed, but also events that could not be organized. Of course, even if you're in difficulty, you can always look to alternatives to create some content. For example, in fashion, we saw that during the lockdown, some brands organized online styling courses or private styling sessions. And I think that with travel, that still there is a lot of things that are now possible versus the last months. But it still stays a sensitive subject, especially also for traveling a long way. So I think that in the coming months and weeks, we will see, of course, a lot of content with the hashtag staycation. In entertainment, on the 1st of July, cinemas are reopening, theme parks also. There you could, for example, look into influencer content where influencers are going to take a look in theme parks to see which measures are taken, and that they are really working on the COVID-proof visits of theme parks. Besides sectors that were in difficulty, you saw also sectors that are having opportunities. It's always like that. This was sports, fitness, and yoga, which was an opportunity for sports brands, sport equipment brands, like Decathlon, for example. Of course, culinary, a lot of Belgians were cooking and trying out new things, which could be good for FMCG. Animals, self-care, of course, the beauty sector. To do it yourself, a lot of people were working on making masks. And yeah, like I said already, also gaming was a sector that saw a lot of opportunities during the lockdown because, again, people had more time and were more open to try out new things like gaming. This was concerning the sectors. If we then have a look in how the influencers themselves reacted on COVID and the Corona times, there were 3 ways they were responding to the coronavirus. The first is they were amping up their content. In fact, it's not surprising that along with an increase in social media usage, people are trying things they've never done before. So they were creating new types of content. They were using new content touch points. For example, we saw that a lot of influencers created a TikTok account during the lockdown, which they didn't have before. They were creating, like Instagram TV tutorials. We saw already that Instagram TV was really in an uplift. They organized Instagram lives. They posted more frequently Instagram stories. We saw do-it-yourself creative ideas for kids, workouts, and self-care routines. So we really saw that some influencers were creating more content than ever. We also saw that some influencers were really open to add a sort of goodwill or good cause layer to their content, and they were very open to work this way. Then there were others in the second case who saw it like a bit of a business as usual, which sounds a bit weird if we know that it was still a very difficult period in the lockdown. But we see that a lot of influencers, although they know that it's a sensitive period, were also afraid of losing business, of course. And what we saw in people that still posted content in business as usual, like, for example, travel content, what was, of course, very important is that they always mentioned that this content was made before Corona. And that is, of course, also important that you really give a sort of context around content that is posted in this business as usual case. The third one, and I think that, taking a break, this was taking a social break. I think a lot of people took a break during this lockdown because, they had less time, maybe if you have your children at home. And also maybe because they were a bit afraid of, having a sort of creative bore out because they didn't know very well how to create content. So they took the decision to go in a sort of social media break. We talked now about difficulties, about the specific context that was COVID in the last weeks. But of course, in every situation, you also have opportunities. It's not all negative, of course. We saw that some of the advertisers used influencer marketing specifically because they are content creators on their own, because they can create their content at home. They don't need a studio or some specific entourage. Of course, in some cases before Corona, this was the case, but they can create a lot of content on their own. And we also see a bit that we go back to the roots of influencer marketing, which is authentic content and creating really this less polished content, because we see in influencer marketing that's it's sometimes a bit too polished. That was something that we saw now that was more like original and authentic. And it's also an opportunity for brands who were not able to create original content because there were a lot of difficulties to make this content, that they used or reused influencer content for their communication. It was an alternative for a lot of things they could not organize, like shootings. And we even saw that in some cases, advertisers admitted that it was more cost efficient, of course, than creating content like they do it in normal periods. And there are also some influencers that are specifically asked for their photography skills because they are really good at it. And that way advertisers could also use these photo material for their campaign. Of course, sometimes you could say, yeah, but this context or this content is not good enough or not professional enough. There is always an opportunity, of course, to make from this user-generated content that we receive from influencers and to make it edited by a professional team. I think a lot of things are possible to start from user-generated content and to make from that something really professional. Other advantages or opportunities are, of course, that influencers are flexible and agile, which is certainly an advantage in Corona times. You can act and react very quickly. Another opportunity, like we saw it already in the last brand recovery series, a lot of media were in an uplift. There was more media and content consumption. We saw more interest in live videos. So this leads to more engagement, which is a very important KPI in influencer marketing. So that's surely also an opportunity. And yeah, of course, we were all in a rather difficult situation. And I think for a lot of people, content on influencer accounts was also a sort of getaway from sometimes always COVID news. Sometimes it's a bit too much and people are really looking for some content that distracts them a bit from the reality. And maybe also something important to add is that some of our targets are not watching traditional media, and via influencer marketing you can reach this target that is not consuming traditional media. So it's not all negative, of course. These were some opportunities on influencer marketing. The last section before we go to cases is some advice and watch outs, which is then mainly interesting for the coming period. First of all, how do you start? You have to ask yourself some questions. Like, for example, now people have specific needs. Can I give an answer to this with my brand or with my product? Who is the person that I want to reach? Which target can benefit from my service or products? And how can I also, I think it's very important that if you go into influence marketing, that you give some value, some added value to your target. And that's not only now, but also, of course, for the long term. To answer these questions, there are some content or potential content that you could produce. We're all working at home, or now I'm at the office, but I think still a lot of people are working at home. So this can be some tips to be productive, tips how to be entertained at home. What can I do? Also, for example, with children at home, how can I be inspired? Like I said, sometimes people are a bit in a down mood. Then you could say, how can I lighten up a bit the lives of people? Store visits to show how it works with COVID. Like I said, also in theme parks, in cinemas, to show people, we really take measures to be COVID proof. And we also see all types of consulting and coaching that are popping up around different topics and themes. And of course, in function of the COVID timeline, we all hope that we will not get back to a lockdown and that it will all stay under control. But of course, you always have to see in which phase of the COVID timeline you are. We also will see in the next slides that it's really very, very important in this time to even more than ever reassess every time your content, because the situation, and we all know it, can change very, very quickly. This is how to start. Of course, some of the things are very sensitive. I will show two situations or cases that you might know. The first one is from the beginning of the lockdown. The other one is very recent. The first is Iriel Charnas, who was a fashion influencer, and she got a COVID test because of a doctor friend. And then afterwards, so she was tested positive. She didn't go into self-isolation before she didn't have any symptoms anymore. Of course, she had a lot of negative reactions on this, and a lot of people who defollowed her, which then caused next scandal, because then she was suspected of buying followers after this loss of followers. If you are linked to these influencers, of course, at that moment, it's not really a very positive collaboration. And then, of course, we have Novak Djokovic, who end of May, so some weeks ago, was posting on his Instagram something about a collaboration with Lacoste, one of his sponsors, about giving money to the Red Cross, a good cause action. And then after some weeks, he organized his tennis tournament and was tested positive. So, of course, these are very difficult situations for brands who are linked with these influencers or with these type of situations. Of course, it's not totally, you don't have everything on your side and in your hands, but there are some things that you can do to avoid bad publicity. For example, the two-way communication is even more important now. We see that in influencer marketing, of course, you need to give some liberty or some creative liberty to your influencers. But in this period, it is important to have this communication to see how are you going to do it. Ask some insight in planned content so you know how it's gonna be posted on these touch points. So that's very important. You also need to, if something happens, because like I say, you can't control everything, you also need to have a sort of backup plan if a problem pops up. And one of the advices is also to work with micro-influencers. There are some reasons for that. We see in a lot of studies that micro-influencers have a lot of potential because they can really work on this engagement, so that's an advantage. But also because micro-influencers will have less press coverage if something happens versus, of course, very well-known influencers. Then, of course, you have, like I said, to constantly reassess your campaigns, because you have to look, maybe some content that you plan now is not valid anymore within 2 weeks, or is too sensible, or something happens, then you need to reassess it. Brand safety, of course, very important. I think in Belgium, a lot of our partners work on that. But of course, with the international platforms, you need to take care about that. And then it's important, of course, to not use COVID or Corona as a reason to jump on the brand wagon and then drive traffic to our channels. That's something that is very sensitive. You really need to have a look at that and don't use it just without a cause, because that's very risky. What can also be a good plan is that if you have influencers with whom you worked already in the past and with whom you have a sort of relation, you know what to expect, how you work together, of course, then also it's better to work with them, and we will come back on that later on. This is also an ideal choice in the strategy to work on a long-term base and not on a short-term base. So this is the first advice to avoid bad publicity. Like I said, working with trusted voices is even more important now than it was before. The screening of influencers is very important. We all know that. And if we are at Dentsu selecting influencers, we are looking in some KPIs and some parameters that I think everyone knows. It's like the engagement rate, the profile of the followers, also the audience geography, because we sometimes see that they have more followers in other countries than Belgium. Then you really need to think about investing in this type of followers. the authenticity score. So we're going to have a look in the last weeks of content of these influencers to see whether they are not buying followers and whether there is no fraud, because that's also a problem of influencer marketing. We're going to see the social history. What are the things they posted? What are the type of partnerships they did with which brands that they work together? And I think specifically, because these are parameters that we used already before Corona, but specifically for COVID, you have to take a look in their approach to COVID-19. For me, it's a sort of unmeasured and unofficial KPI. You will not find it in tools, but it's something you can see in the social history from the last months to feel, is this the tone of voice that I like? Is this the way sort of influencers that I want to work with? That's also important to have a look at that before you go into a partnership with an influencer. I mentioned already the tone of voice. I think, even more now, it's really important. You really need to find this right tone of voice that goes well with the actual situation that we're in, but that is still appealing to the audience that you want to talk to. We see that some things are really very important, like relevance and authenticity. And I think that a lot of influencers know how they have to talk to their followers, but it is important. And this doesn't mean that you always have to be very serious, because people also need distraction. They sometimes want to get away from all these serious messages. So you can be more lighthearted, positive and entertaining. That's not a problem, but not tactless. Of course, you have to take that into account. I think influencer marketing can also be a good touch point for a brand to talk to some people and use this really as a communication channel, because it makes you a bit more human. It can also be, for example, if you are supporting a good cause, it's easier to spread this message via influencer than, for example, communicate it on your brand platform, because if you do it via influencers, it's really creating this sense of authenticity. And then what is also important, I already mentioned it, is besides selecting the right influencer, trying to avoid this bad publicity and using the right tone of voice, it's this long-term approach. I think that even before Corona, this was already stated in a lot of studies that maybe in the beginning of influencer marketing, it was much more ad hoc, these collaborations. You also saw some influencers that were maybe working together 1 week or 1 month with this brand and then the next month with another brand. It still happens, but I think that the influencer marketing business is becoming more mature, and this is reflecting also in more brands that are going in a long-term approach. And I think that especially during these times, it's the moment to think about a long-term approach. You really have to see them as your voice, the people that create branded content for you. I also think that besides working together on a long-term basis with influencers, it's also important to have a more long-term content approach. So you know that you're going to work longer together with an influencer, then you can plan also already on content and for example, schedule already some posts or photos that you want to post in the next months. This also allows you to better have a control on the situation. For example, if situation changes, that you can already have these scenarios provided in your influencer strategy. In this advice and watch out part, there is one last slide that I would like to share with you. We saw in our brand recovery series that the focus on e-commerce is of course very important. A lot of brands that were not active on this worked on it during the lockdown because they saw that this was the channel to generate sales. This is the same for influencer marketing. I think the only thing that you need to decide on is which type of campaign it is, because you have branding campaigns and sales campaigns. Try to not to do too much in one campaign, or don't want to give too much messages in one campaign. That's important. Also look into who do you want to reach, and in which phase is this consumer. For example, is it about awareness? Do you want to work on consideration for your product? Is it really about purchase? Then of course you can make your content with influencers interactive. There are a lot of possibilities to make content interactive. We have our Belgian spot technology. There are some startups that are working on it. You have all the possibilities in Instagram, for example, to work on e-commerce. But if you're really using touchpoint influencer marketing for sales, then it's of course important to make this link to e-commerce. I think with the facts and figures on social media, the opportunities we saw, although the sector is also in difficulty, and some advices and watch-outs, we can now have a look in some cases that I selected, where you will see that some of these insights are reflected in the cases that I mentioned in this presentation. So let's have a look. The first of the cases is a case of Estée Lauder, one of our clients. It's a case from India. As you know, there the lockdown was also very severe, and Estée Lauder was searching for a way in a specific situation to still make connection with the influencers with whom they worked in the past. And in the concept, you will see in the case, it's like the video conferencing. We all know that video conferencing was really very, very successful in the last months. So what they did was they were looking with whom did we work in the past, and how can we connect with them. The problem was a bit that they didn't have their own owned Instagram channel in India where they could work with, and that Facebook is in India really an underutilized influencer platform. So what did they do? They decided to invite their influencers on a 1.5 hour Zoom meeting. So it's a bit strange because we all know the Zoom meetings, of course, for business. But they invited a lot of influencers. They asked them to provide the Estée Lauder products they had already because they worked with Estée Lauder in the past. And then the beauty routine was done in live with an instructor of an educational instructor of Estée Lauder. So they did a Zoom seminar, and what was really nice is that in this case, Estée Lauder didn't have to invest because it was really goodwill. The influencers were really looking towards this type of collaboration. And because of that, they had a lot of earned media after the campaign. So you see some posts, some stories that the influencers that participated in the Zoom meeting that they published on their social media. And what was also nice is that Estée Lauder asked to use them on their brand platforms, and that nearly all the influencers were willing to do this because they really liked the fact that the brand also connected with them during difficult times for them, but also for the brand. So it was an industry first campaign with these Zoom, and afterwards they really did some other Zoom events which were also very successful. So I really think that this is a way that maybe it's not like posting on Instagram or on TikTok, but really using another type of video format like Zoom to create some content for the brand. The next two cases. So you all know that Eva Longoria is the actress that is working for L'Oréal. And of course, we always see a lot of TV spots from L'Oréal with Eva Longoria, but then we went into the lockdown. And so they decided to make a TV spot with her via Instagram. So it was a TV spot for a coloring cream. You will find the link in the presentation. You can have a look at it afterwards. And you really see that she is used to doing this type of things. And she also directed the TV spot herself. So this was content for the brand that was made via social media, and that was afterwards also used in an offline way. So I think it's also something that we didn't see before COVID, but it's a nice way to create some really good content for a brand via influencer marketing. Then the Some Good News case with John Krasinski. I guess you might have seen it already. So he created a lot of YouTube videos, but really with the aim to create some positive content as a counterpart to all the negative things that we heard and the news that we are hearing every day. And it really an enormous success on YouTube. I think this shows what I said, that you don't always have to be in a serious modus, but yet you can also have a sort of entertaining type of content, and that people are really liking this content in the chaos of COVID-19 period. The fourth case, well, the fourth and the fifth case are illustrating that marketing and advertising efforts are more effective when brands partner up with causes. So the first is the distance dance with Charlie D'Amelio on TikTok. I didn't know TikTok very well before COVID, but I must admit that I also discovered more of the touch points during the Corona and the lockdown. And so she, Procter & Gamble encouraged people to do a dance at home. So that was the hashtag distance dance video. It was really a big success on TikTok. And they offered some money to some good causes, which is, of course, giving a really nice extra layer to this campaign. The same happened for Mondelez with the hashtag cookie with a cause Oreo campaign. So they were together with some influencers. It was a really difficult challenge. You had to put a cookie on your forehead and then move it to your mouth with your on your own way. This created, of course, a lot of interactivity. People tried it. People posted content. And in fact, Mondelez also decided to give money to some good causes in function of the number of videos that were posted with the hashtag cookie with a cause. Some other things that we observed was that a lot of people consumed more live content, more video content. These are two local examples. Sophie Dumont, which is a very well-known chef, especially in Flanders. She, during the Corona times and the lockdown, she had an Instagram live and a Facebook live every week, which she didn't do that so much before, because then she had other possibilities to create content. The advantage of this type of content is that you can also answer live questions. So the engagement and the interactivity is bigger and higher, of course. And also this proximity is higher if you do this type of content. This was also linked to the fact that culinary content is very popular during these times. Another example is from the fashion sector. Ellen Kegels, who has since several years her own knit brand, Ellen Knits. She has her brand store in Antwerp. It was closed during the lockdown, and even now it's only open during two days a week. But she decided to start with Instagram lives, where she was showing people some of her pieces in the shop. So that was also new for her, but it's a new way to talk to your target and to generate this engagement with people who potentially can buy your brand. And the last two cases, the seventh case is a case about an Australian model, Harvey Petito, who worked together with FIFA to encourage people to play at home. This is linked, of course, with the fact that traditional sports was rather difficult to do that. And of course, the fact that they played on the success of gaming during Corona, but it's also an important way for people to stay socially connected during this time, and that was a collaboration with FIFA. The last case is a local case. It's a Show Your Brussels Love campaign, where people were, they were bringing generations together to, in fact, it was young people, influencers that were making messages to older people who were, like, sometimes in isolation during weeks. So this was a connection between several generations, which is, I think, also a very nice example how you can use influencer marketing. And I also think that in the future, we all know that it will maybe be a bit difficult to stay with all the rules that are in place for Corona. We see that some people have difficulties to follow it. And I think that young influencers can have also a role to play to sensibilize people about things that are really important during Corona times. You can have the presentation, you can have a look at the presentation afterwards. Of course, if you have any questions about these cases, you can always reach out to us. With this illustration of the cases, we can come to a conclusion about influencer marketing during COVID times. What can we learn about the things that I told you before? Maybe circumstances are not easy, but you see in facts and figures of social media that it really stays an important touch point, especially for the younger targets. But I think that you can see it broader. We see that, for example, TikTok is having a more broad following public, so it can also be an opportunity. Like we said, it is important to continue communicating, not only on other touch points, but also on influencer marketing. But what I think is that talented content creators will have more perspective. So influencer marketing is more and more a medium that is about storytelling. And I think that on the long term, the influencers that are really good at creating authentic and really engaging content that they are having will be the ones who will be the most successful. Maybe influencer marketing suffered a bit from authenticity in the last period, but with the Corona and the lockdown, we saw a return to these principles of trust and authenticity. Like I said, I think, for example, travel influencers could hide often behind very nice beaches and beautiful hotels, and that other influencers were really, like creating this sometimes not so authentic content. But as we didn't have all these possibilities in Corona times, there was a going back to this authentic importance of influencer marketing. Luckily, we are going back to a bit of normal. Of course, it's not a back to normal completely, but with yesterday, the announcements of the government, we see that there are some possibilities in the next weeks and months. So this will offer opportunities for influencer marketing, as some events will be organized, as some brands will be able to reconnect with influencers in real time, and maybe not only via video or online platforms. What is also important is that as we were some months in lockdown, there are some new habits that are created. So people are still a lot at home and are also more digitally and connected with their mobile devices, for example. So that's something that won't change a lot, I think, in the next month. So you have to take this into account if you create some influencer campaigns. And I think it's also an opportunity. We had some time to think and reflect on some things. So maybe this can help to prepare the future in what concerns your strategy on influencer marketing. And like I said, work more on this long-term approach. It's the fact that the engagement was higher on influencer touch points is really an advantage if we will be able to keep this and to build on the relationship that influencers had with their followers more than ever. If you can work on it, I think it can be more effective. The last thing is, as we don't know what will happen in the next months, so you have to stay very alert and monitor the situation constantly. This is, of course, also very important for all content that is published now and in the next months. With this conclusion, the last thing I would like to do is to talk about influencer marketing at DEN. I'm going to show you the team. So I think some of you might know the StoryLab team at Dentsu. Maarten and Laura are working with me on all types of media partnerships. And what is important, if I talk about the vision of StoryLab and influencer marketing, you all know that we are a media agency. And of course, in Belgium, there are a lot of dedicated influencer agencies. But what we saw is that the link between influencer marketing and media is becoming much closer. You also see that in the Belgian landscape, a lot of influencer agencies are linked now with media partners and media groups. And in fact, that's what we created also at Dentsu. Our digital agency Isobar started with influencer marketing some years ago, and it was logic at that moment that it was at the digital agency. But some months ago, we took over from Isobar the influencer marketing activity at StoryLab because of this thing that we see that the link is much closer now with media. And so it's logic that that StoryLab, who treats already all the media partnerships, that we also take the activity of influencer marketing at our sites. To illustrate this, you see here the triangle between media, brands, and content. This illustrates what I just explained. In fact, there is a big demand for content in these media ecosystems, and media can work as an amplificator for the content that is made on influencer marketing. The content we can use it with these media owners, and the brands can talk via the influencers to their audience in a different way, and again build these long-term partnerships. And I think that in the center of this triangle, these influencers, which are these digital first talents, are really at the center to create content on their touch points, but also amplified via media. And just to end, a quick note on our way of working. Of course, we will always, if we start with a briefing on influencer marketing, we will analyze the briefing on some top parameters that are very logical, like region, the target, the budget. But we also have our own tool, CCS, which some of you might know already. And this is interesting because it's not only who are the followers of an influencer and who are they reaching, but and sometimes it seems very logical that if you have a beauty collaboration, that you're going to work together with beauty experts as influencers. But in CCS, we also see some other interest fields that can be interesting to work on influencer marketing. For example, if it's about a beauty product that has a strong link with ecology, with this green nature, then it can be really interesting to look, besides working together with beauty influencers, to work also together with influencers that are very credible and authentic in these activities of nature and ecology. When we select them, of course, with some tools that we have to spot them, we are also going to have a look into hashtags to see whether we find some new people to work with. like I said, you have in Belgium is not so big. You have already the two regions, which makes it a bit complex. But yeah, this way we can maybe discover new influencers that are maybe smaller but can be of a big interest in terms of engagement. So that's not only macro but also micro influencers. And just to come back quickly on the COVID times, we saw that some brands and some advertisers used some of their own people that worked at their industry to communicate about their brand and industry, because even though these people might be not so big in terms of following, but they can be very credible, and even more credible for some types of communications than maybe big premium influencers. So it's not so, it's not that you have to take always the same influencers and then and the influencers that pop up maybe in your head as the first ones. So that's important in the selection phase. And then the third phase is, of course, creating the content with them. We can offer them a sort of framework. Like I said, you need to give them some independence. It's not like broadcasting just a TV spot on TV. This is really about giving their own touch to content that they are creating. So that's important. And then hopefully we will have some more liberty to organize events and activations for them in the next months. And then the fourth phase, the reason why, again, we think it's very interesting to have also this influencer marketing activity at a media agency, is that it's not anymore an island on its own, influencer marketing. It's really becoming part of the media ecosystem. And that's something you can do, so amplifying their reach via other touch points in online and offline media, in paid media, to really create this amplification of content that is created by influencers. And that's, of course, something we do every day, creating media campaigns and searching for the right media touch point. And so that's the reason why today I was presenting you some information, advice on influencer marketing. And this brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope that I was able to give you a sort of overview of what we saw as insights on influencer marketing in the last months. It was a really new situation for everyone, and it had its impact on all types of people, touch points, and also on people creating everyday content on their platforms. So if you have any questions, you always know to find us. You can contact Thibaut, you can contact me. We're always ready to answer your questions or to give some more information on one of the topics I discussed today. Thibaut, I don't know whether...
Yes, thank you, Marjolein. You can go to the next slide. Thank you all
yeah,
for
sorry.
following this webinar by Marjolein. I hope you found it interesting and that you find some inspiration to think of your influencer marketing actions in the coming weeks and months. Just before we get to the Q&A, I got one question from someone. But just before going into those questions, just wanted to share what is new or what has been recently uploaded on the Brand Recovery series. So next Tuesday, so not Thursday as usual, but Tuesday, we'll have one of our partners, DPG Media, coming to present in a webinar their view on the new normal in media. So that's a webinar that is coming. This will be also the last webinar before summer, before we get back to our caves and do a lot more research on what we can offer you after. We also had an interesting interview with Karen Nelson Field, who is a professor at the University of Adelaide and is doing a lot on the attention economy. So if you would be interested in the attention economy, that will be one of the person to follow. And obviously any piece of content article that we capture and that we can share on our blog will be shared on brandrecoveryseries.com. Or if you have any other questions, please send them to brandrecoveryseries@densuaegis.com. So this is for the official part. Now let's go back to influencer marketing. Marjolein, I had an interesting question. Do you think that influencers can really have an effect on brand visibility? And if so, should you choose for micro or rather macro influencers?
Well, also on that topic, there's a lot of information published these last periods. I think that in the beginning, like I said, a lot of campaigns relied on these macro influencers. Maybe I should first also say that in Belgium, of course, macro and micro, how they treat these type of influencers in, for example, the USA is totally different. We don't have in Belgium a lot of big macro influencers. So often we say already that, if you have between 50 and 100,000 followers, it's already rather big in Belgium. I really think that it depends, of course, of the briefing and the budget. We all know that macro influencers, it's taking a lot of your budget. So of course they have their importance because, like you say, in visibility and in reach, they are bigger. But imagine that you, for example, during these Corona times, that you want to talk especially to people in Antwerp because you have a specific communication. Then it's much better to search for some or several micro influencers, which will cost you a lot less money than one big macro influencers, where you will have a lot of waste. So I think it's like in all media touch points, you have to see what are my main objectives and what is the budget that I have to reach this. And then I would make my choice. So sometimes I think, because also macro influencers is certainly interesting for reach, but micro influencers, we see in all tools that their engagement rate is often much better, which is also interesting. If you have 5 micro influencers with a really interesting engagement rate, I think for a lot of briefings, this can really be a good answer. You always have to look to the bigger picture also. What are the other touch points that are used in your campaign? And can we maybe find a link between what you do with influencers and what you're doing in other media? So I don't think that there is a really black or white answer that it's always the best thing to work with micro or macro influencers. But what we really see in all studies and research of the last months is that micro influencers are really becoming more important because of the fact that now we look less to the reach, which was more the case in the beginning of influencer marketing, but we really look more to engagement rate. What we also see is that some macro influencers don't have a good authenticity score, and that's something that is really important for us. We're never going to advise our clients on influencers that are not having even though if they have a lot of followers and maybe they're very well known, but if their authenticity score is not good, then it's better not to work together with them. So that's what we see in the last, that's one of the most important evolutions in influencer marketing of the last month. So.
There was, just to finish, one last question. There was another one on, there's a huge discussion on whether marketeers should focus their activities on, or their efforts on, short or long term. When it comes to influencer marketing, do you think it will be more effective to use influencers with long-term activations, or more on ad hoc activations, so more short-term?
Like we saw in the presentation, again, this is an evolution that we see versus previous periods on influencer marketing, that brands really try to work towards this long-term partnership. Because then at that moment, the influencer with whom you work become more like ambassadors for your brand. Of course, again, we know that long-term partnerships, that has a cost. I mean, if you ask an influencer to work with you on a 6-month basis or on a yearly basis, he's always gonna ask some budget for that. And we also know that in some sectors it's easier to work together on a long term with influence. And for example, beauty is very difficult, we know. So if you want to have ambassadors there, it's yeah, you have to foresee some budget. But then on other, there are a lot of other sectors where I think it's underused, and where you can really, yeah, try to work towards an ambassador collaboration instead of ad hoc. Like I said, I think that was one of the big problems of influencer marketing in the beginning, that people saw all types of brands and products with one influencer. I think a lot of them also yeah, took some lessons from that. But yeah, I am really saying that long-term partnerships are better, but I also realize that sometimes it's not possible with budgets. But if you have this possibility to plan already your budget on a longer term, then I would advise, yeah, absolutely, to work together on a long-term
Yeah.
basis. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for the clear answers. So I suggest that we stop here. We're 3 minutes over time. Thank you
Hey.
again, all, for being here. And obviously, the recording and the presentation will be shared on our blog and through an emailing database in which you are all present too. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.